supporting local bookstores, audiobooks, and more. Join the world of stories. As always, thank you for listening.
Hi, and welcome to the Libro.fm podcast, where we talk to authors, narrators, booksellers, and more. I'm Karen.
And I'm Craig. On today's episode, we sat down in person with Claire Lombardo, who wrote The Most Fun We Ever Had and the forthcoming Same As It Ever Was, which comes out next month in June at the time of recording.
Yes, we just had such a good time with Claire. We were in Cincinnati at Winter Institute. We, I think, became great friends. We know all about her trip to the zoo to see some penguins. She is just such a delightful person.
Yes, we were literally texting the next day. We had a group chat going about penguins. It was very lovely. So Claire, if you're listening, thank you for sending us the penguin photo. I'm glad that you made it to the zoo.
We also were so lucky as to receive an advanced reader's copy for her new book, which is coming out. And I have to say, I absolutely love it. So I cannot wait for you all to hear more about it on the episode and to get your hands on it soon.
So good, so good. I will play a clip from Claire's book, and then we will roll the interview. And as always, stick around after the interview to hear what Karen and I are currently listening to. And maybe we'll tease some upcoming episodes.
Yeah, roll the clip.
Other people overwhelmed her. Strange, perhaps, for a woman who'd added 4 beings to the universe of her own reluctant volition, but a fact nonetheless. Marilyn rued the inconvenient presence of bodies beyond her control, her understanding, bodies beyond her favor. She rued them now from her shielded spot beneath the ginkgo tree, where she was hiding from her guests. She'd always had that knack for entertaining, but it drained her fully, time and time again. Decades of her father's wealthy clients and her husband's humorless colleagues, of her children's temperamental friends, of her transitory neighbors and ever-shifting roster of customers. And yet, today, 100-odd near strangers in her backyard, humans in motion, staying in motion, formally clad, tipsy celebrants of the union of their eldest daughter, Wendy. People who were her responsibility for this evening, when she already had so much on her plate. Not literally, for she'd neglected to take advantage of the farm fresh menu spread over 3 extra-long card tables, but elementally, 4 girls for whose presences she was biologically and socially responsible, polka-dotting the lawn in their summer pastels. The fruits of her womb, implanted repeatedly by the sweetness of her husband, who was currently nowhere to be found.
Hello, everyone. Today we are here in person with author Claire Lombardo. Welcome to the podcast, Claire.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, we are so excited that you could find the time to chat with us amidst the conference and exploring Cincinnati. We would love if you could introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a little more about what you're up to in the world.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, it's a delight to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm Claire Lombardo. I am a novelist. I guess I can call myself a novelist now. I have a second book coming out this summer. My first novel was The Most Fun We Ever Had. It came out in 2019. And my second book, Same As It Ever Was, is coming out from Doubleday Books in 2024. So I'm here at Winter Institute. It's very overwhelming, but meeting a lot of really lovely people and lovely booksellers, some of whom I got to meet almost 5 years ago and get to see again. So it's been really, really fun so far.
Awesome. Well, I definitely want to ask you questions about the new novel that you just mentioned. I'm so excited, huge fan of your work, so cannot wait to have it in my hands. What can you share with us about the novel?
Sure. So you get, well, this is not a privilege for you. You get my very unedited version because this is sort of my first time talking, not my first time ever talking about it, but I'm still, I guess I'm still figuring out how to talk about it. So it's called Same As It Ever Was. It is about a woman named Julia Ames, who, when we meet her at the beginning of the novel, is in her late 50s, happily married, living a very comfortable life in the suburbs of Chicago. And then she runs into an old friend who she both did not expect to and hoped not ever to see again. And then she sort of starts to spiral. So it's sort of we go back in time then to different phases in Julia's life. And so it's kind of almost a panoramic exploration of one woman's life, which is what I love about writing, is that you can push open whatever doors that you want. And so with Julia, this character sort of came to me, and then I got to do the really fun part of just being really nosy and figuring out whatever I could about her. So we see Julia in the present for half the book, and then the other half is her childhood in Chicago. This very pivotal friendship she had in her mid-30s, and then back to when she meets her husband Mark. So we sort of get to see all these different critical points of her life and how they shaped who she is.
Oh, thank you. I am so excited for this book. And one of the quotes that I read in a description of it said that at its heart is what it takes to form and keep a family. And that sentiment also feels very much in line with your first novel as well, and is something that I love about The Most Fun We Ever Had. So I was just curious what it is about that question that is so compelling to you and drives your writing.
That's such a good question. I mean, I find family dynamics so fascinating, which I guess is why I've written now 2 really long family stories. But I think, I come from a big family. Maybe that has something to do with it. But I had a similar sort of phenomenon happen with The Most Fun We Ever Had, which is that I started with a character who I was interested in, and then I realized how we're all sort of shaped and defined by the people in our lives, for better or for worse. So in Most Fun, it was the Violet character. And then I discovered she had a sister, and then I discovered she had parents, as do we all in some, shape or form. And so the same thing happened in Same As It Ever Was, where I was sort of, none of us exist in a vacuum, try as we might sometimes. And so I think I'm interested in that. We don't choose our family. Sometimes we do. And so I'm interested in either side of that situation. But yeah, I think I also just find it's more fun to write about colorful casts of characters, and the bigger the family. I remember when I was a graduate student, the novelist Margot Livesey said that there are 2 kinds of families in fiction, messy families and tidy families, and authors tend to skew towards one or the other. I very much tend toward messiness. And that's what ended up happening in Same As It Ever Was, too. Julia had a husband, and then she had 2 kids, and then she had her husband's very close friends who are like family to her. And then it was, she has a mother and she has a father. And, so I got to kind of just keep digging and finding all these new people to spy on. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that.
I read in the New York Times that The Most Fun We Ever Had started as a short story to kill time while you were in social work school. And I'm just curious how it went from being a hobby to being a bestseller, full-length novel.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
I'm still not entirely sure how that happened, but I started social work school, graduate school, to become a therapist the same week that I really seriously started writing, which I didn't consider it a novel at the time. Like you said, it was just this really long story that I just kept writing and writing. And over a couple of months, I found that I was spending far more time writing fiction than I was studying or doing the things that I was supposed to be doing. And I had done social work field work prior to going to school. So I think that was part of it, too, is that I had the sort of hands-on experience, and then to suddenly go from that to go to the sort of sterile pedagogical textbook side of things, I found really underwhelming and sort of boring. But I just sort of became enraptured by this family. So I dropped out of school for the second time in my life. People don't like when I talk to their kids about this. I'm I dropped out of school a bunch of times and everything still turned out okay. But I dropped out of school, and I told myself that I would give myself a year to devote to the novel. I had a bunch of weird temp jobs to kind of, keep myself afloat. But I told myself I would take a year, and if nothing happened, I would go back to school. And in that time, I applied to MFA programs, and then it all kind of, kept going from there. I stuck with the book, and then I ended up having an 800-page draft by the time I started graduate school for creative writing. And yeah, it's one of the most wonderful things that's ever happened to me. And I'm still very, very, very grateful for all the sort of ways that my life turned in directions I wasn't expecting, because I was expecting my life to look very, very, very different, and I was expecting to be a therapist and who just read a lot of fiction, and so I don't really know either.
That's so beautiful. And, with all of these things that you've done in the world, I'm guessing that your day-to-day now at this point looks a lot different than it did, before you were writing, and as you're saying, when you started working on this novel. So what has that process been like to be like, I'm a full-time writer. This is what I'm doing now.
It's wild. Yeah. It's funny. When I started graduate school, it was the first time I was being paid to write. I was making $18,000 a year total, but all I had to do was write. And so I had enough money to pay my rent, and I was just given the gift of time, which is the greatest possible thing you could give a writer. And I didn't write for the first several months of graduate school because I was just like, what do I do with this? Because I was so used to writing on the subway on my way to work, or writing on my phone, on my lunch breaks, or writing. I was a nanny for a while, and I would come home and I was like furious and really tired, and I would just write to kind of like have this little piece of my day that was my own. And then suddenly it was like, you just have 24 hours a day to write, and I didn't know what to do with that. And so I think in a way that was a good lesson, because I slowly sort of figured out how to treat my writing like a job when I was a graduate student. And now I do sometimes it just feels like it's such a gift of time. And I really do, that is my approach, is that I do try to treat it not like a 9-to-5 job, but in the same sort of structured way that I've treated previous jobs I've had. And it's incredible. Like I truly cannot believe that my job is my job. I feel so lucky. I mean, I worked hard, but I also there's a lot of factors that go into getting to do that. And a lot of them are luck. And I feel very, very lucky that I get to do the thing I love. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing. The audiobook for your first novel was beautifully narrated by Emily Rankin. And I was curious, what was your involvement there? Like, did you meet and discuss the characters, or did you just get something sent to you? Like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, she did such an amazing job. I didn't have a ton of involvement. They sent me a few samples, and she was the one I chose. And she did an incredible job. And I think the thing that I love about, is it sociopathic to say that I've listened to my own audiobook?
I love that you have. Some authors tell us they've never listened to it, and I'm always like, how? I would, like, the day I got it, I'd be like, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, for real.
Ceaselessly. So, okay, thank you. I did listen to it. And I think the thing that's so incredible is that she doesn't do like voices, but you can always tell what character you're with.
Yes.
And that was, just such a wonderful, way to see your book come to life in a different medium. I love audiobooks. I listen to audiobooks all the time. So I was very, I guess I was nervous, because a bad narrator can ruin a book. And she did just an incredible job. So, yeah.
How long are the samples that get sent to you, out of curiosity?
Oh, gosh. I don't remember. I want to just say a couple minutes.
Okay.
God, that's so scary, having to choose. Like, I want you to read my 30-hour book based off listening to 2 minutes of someone talking. Like,
and I don't even think it's your book that you're hearing them read.
Oh
As
my
I
God.
recall, don't quote me on that, but I think it is just.
don't quote you on that. We're on the podcast.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
We're quoting
One
you.
of you said that. I think it was. Well, and I'm sort of I tend to be a little obsessive, so I went and looked and listened to samples of other books that they'd narrated, and because I do recall seeing other narrators and looking at books that I could see as being comps to mine. Because someone reading a fantasy novel isn't necessarily listening to someone do that is not necessarily going to be helpful to me in terms of how that person's going to read my sort of sleepy, not sleepy, that's a terrible word to describe a book marketing wise. My not fantasy.
Hey, I didn't see that on the cover. A sleepy little novel.
Don't tell anyone I said that again.
Speaking of audiobooks, I could not for the life of me figure out who's narrating your next book. It's not
Me
listed
either.
anywhere. Oh, me neither. Okay. Well, there goes my question. I was going to ask you any spicy details about.
No, and I don't. I literally finished the edits of my book last night when I got home from dinner. So
wow.
I'm assuming that that's in the works.
Nice.
I'll let you know when I find
Yeah,
out.
we'll look forward to it.
Exciting.
Yeah.
So I love the audiobook as well. And one of the things that I think really shines is your dialogue in the audiobook, because I think you handle dialogue really uniquely. It's very realistic. And that, in real life, people don't always finish their sentences, and they're not always a closed unit as a sentence. Sometimes the train of thought blurs together, or people stammer their way through things, and you put that on the page, which I really love. So it came across so beautifully in the audio, and just was so realistic. And I was just curious if there was anything you could share with our listeners about how you think about dialogue as you're crafting your characters.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny. Dialogue is my favorite thing to write. And it comes fairly naturally to me. It's something I don't think consciously about a whole lot, but one thing that is very important to me is what you just described. I want my dialogue to sound like people talking, and most people are not terribly eloquent. And I'm sure in the last 10 minutes, I've interrupted myself. I've used a word that I didn't intend to use. I've, interrupted one of you. Like that's what we do when I just did it now. And so that's something that is important to me in my fiction, because I try to be honest about other parts of people's lives and the insides of their houses and the insides of their heads and their relationships. And so with my dialogue, I also do one thing I tell my students, and this is advice I follow myself, which is not true for all the advice I give my students, is read your dialogue aloud. So if you are a writer and you want to sort of vet your own dialogue, I guess. If you are reading your dialogue aloud and you are stumbling over your sentences, or you feel like you're sounding strangely formal, or when you don't want to, that is something that I've always found incredibly helpful. Is this what actual people sound like? I will say readers seem to be divided on my use of M dashes and interruption. Some people find it really annoying. I see when people tag me in negative reviews on Instagram, which, like, please don't do that to a writer. Need I say that? But people either seem to find it annoying, like, why are people always interrupting each other? But it's like, I don't know, maybe that's just my family, but that's how, how a lot of my conversations go. And it's not always hostile. I think it's also the sign of a fruitful conversation if you're both not just like sitting and waiting for your turn to talk. So that's kind of my approach. And I love writing dialogue, and I got to write for television very briefly, and that was so much fun too, because it's all dialogue. Like, you have to do most of the work in dialogue, and it really can do a lot of the heavy lifting in a novel. So I'm glad that I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's such an amazing answer. And as you were talking about that, I remembered this distinct moment in your book where the husband and wife are having a conversation, and he says, "What's wrong?" And she's like, "How do you know something's wrong?" And he says, "You haven't finished a single sentence since we started this conversation." And I looked back up the page, and I was like, "No, she didn't." I loved that.
Oh, thank you.
Before we ask this next question, do you still work at the Prairie Light Books or no?
I do.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure I was going to word this differently if you didn't.
Oh,
okay.
sure. Thanks.
And now I don't have to chop and screw
Edit
it
it out.
Post out.
Oh, good.
Cool. According to your bio, you are a bookseller at the beautiful bookstore Prairie Light Books. That's amazing. And I'm curious, what are your favorite parts about bookselling?
Ooh, that's such a good question. Yeah, I started working at Prairie Lights, my indie in Iowa City, about a year ago. Just a couple of afternoons a week. My favorite parts, I just love it there. I love, it's a bookstore that's been around since, I never remember this, I think 1974. It's been around for a long time, and it's kind of it's an institution in our little college town. I love how it feels in the bookstore. I love that people, even around the holidays when things are super crazy, people are coming in with sort of a common goal or mindset. People are coming in because they like to read, or because their husband likes to read, or because their grandkids really want, the next book in some series. And book people tend to be like the best people. So I think it's good for morale. It's also been really interesting having been, on the writing side of publishing for a few years, to kind of see the business end and sort of see how books get chosen, the sort of philosophy of even just design, how we lay out the store and how we choose what, gets to be at the forefront. And I also think there's Jan Weiss-Miller, who's the owner of the bookstore now, is so thoughtful, and she's so well read. She reads more than like anyone I know, but she is so good at sort of looking at someone or talking to someone for just a couple of minutes and being able to say, I think you would really like this. And that's obviously what I'm just describing bookselling to you. You don't need me to do that at a bookseller conference, but there's something so lovely about that. And I think it requires a lot of empathy and a lot of sort of awareness of other people. And so to get to witness that and to get to do some of that too, and have books that I'm really excited about that maybe I've read in galleys, or was sent to Blurb, and then I just get to yell about them to strangers. Like it's amazing. Yeah. So it's been really lovely to be welcomed there. I have a lot of fun there. Yeah.
How does it feel when you see your book on the shelf at the bookstore?
It's weird. I've never sold my own book. I've seen it be hand sold because Jan hand sells my book a lot, which is really lovely. But I try not to look at it. Once I had to pull it off the shelf for some reason. I don't remember why, but I was being very furtive because I felt sort of like a psychopath. But yeah, so I have not hand sold my own book to anyone.
When it gets hand sold, are they like, that's the author over there, and like make you sign it?
And sometimes not.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on the customer. Yeah.
What is your favorite book to hand sell?
Ooh, my favorite book to hand sell. Can I tell you 3?
Oh, yes, okay. Please. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. My easiest hand sell is The Sentence by Louise Erdrich, which is a great sort of book-selling novel. It's also just such a great novel. I have family in Minneapolis. I was in Minneapolis during, George Floyd, and that's a lot of what that book is about, that time period during COVID. So that is a very easy sell. I'm not the only person to be hand selling that book. 2 other books, Fellowship Point by Alice Elliott Dark, which I imagine is sort of like selling my book. You have to say it's 550 pages long. However, which I never do for my own book, but it is so easy to do for Fellowship Point. That's a book that I just fell in love with when I was reading it. And even though it's really long, I couldn't stop reading it, and I was really sad when it was over. And then my third, which I get really excited about, is American Mermaid by Julia. I'm not sure how you say her last name. It was so good. My editor had sent me a copy of it, and I was like almost crying, laughing in my bed, which never happened. I mean, it doesn't never happen to me, but it rarely happens to me. And so that's a book that I have been pushing on as many people as possible. Yeah.
Amazing.
Oh, thank you.
I just hand sold 3 copies.
Yeah. Okay. My work is done.
So as we're getting close to the end of our time together, we have a little lightning round for you where we're going to ask you some sillier, lighthearted questions, and you don't need to think about them too much.
Okay.
And I think Craig has the first one.
Yes. Which New York Times puzzle game do you feel you are best at?
I do all of them.
We do some research here.
Okay. Well, I don't want to brag. I am very good at spelling bee. I have a brain, and I have since I was a kid. And when I was a kid, I'm sorry, this is a really long answer to a lightning round.
Great.
Okay. In the Chicago Tribune on the puzzle page, it was called the Jumble, and it's the same idea, but it's like there's 7 letters and little bubbles, and you have to figure out what the word is. Mm-hmm. And there's something about my brain. My brain is not mathematical at all, but I can look at that and the word forms. So I love spelling bee so much. I also do. I'm on I think I'm on a 474-day crossword streak at the
Oh, my
moment.
Lord.
That's amazing.
Thank you. I also really like Connections. I'm not completely committed to Connections. Oh, and I play Wordle with one of my friends, and it's our way of telling each other that we're alive every day.
I love that.
So I love all of them equally,
Amazing.
but Spelling Bee has gotten me through some dark writing days.
I was going to brag about my 8-day streak on the mini, but now I won't.
That's impressive too.
The mini counts and it's great.
It does.
If not a therapist, a novelist, or a bookseller, what would you be?
Oh gosh, something with animals. I think
Running
not
a
a
penguin
vet.
retirement home.
Yes. Yeah, I might just work at an animal shelter or something. That sounds like a very Pollyanna answer, but something that I could be around a lot of dogs all the
Awesome.
time. Yeah.
All right, it's a friend's night out. Bowling or escape room or something completely different?
An escape room is my purest nightmare.
Also hate an escape room.
Yeah, I've never been to one. I never will go to one. I guess bowling. I'm not a good bowler, but it's a nice vibe. Never an escape room is the real answer.
Let's go out and do work.
Yeah. Exactly.
I actually found this question online and I laughed so hard and I'm like, I can't wait to ask Claire. If you could only use one punctuation mark for the rest of your life, what would you choose?
God. I love a semicolon, but I really love an M dash. I think I'd have to go with the semicolon though, because it has a broader usage.
It's more
But
versatile. Yeah.
I just love a semicolon. Sometimes I look, and I was just editing my own, like very intense copy editing my own manuscript, and I couldn't tell you how many semicolons, but there's a lot. And I have a friend who told me once I'm the only person that she knows who uses semicolons in my text messages. So I guess I would have to
love
choose the
that.
semicolon. Yeah.
All right, our next and last question before we are going to ask you for book recommendations is Instagram story time, where we comb through your Instagram, pick a photo, and then ask for the story on it. It's an easy one.
Okay.
I actually have a picture of it here, if that's
Is
helpful
it
for
my
you.
dog?
It's not your dog. There were so many cute dog photos.
We really
there.
enjoyed your
my
dog
Post-it
photos.
board. Okay. Yeah, there's my Post-it board. Okay.
So we love talking to authors about this. I think Abraham Verghese had a picture of his whiteboard that was
Grady
very-
Hendrix also had
Grady
a
Hendrix.
crazy mood board. Yeah.
And everyone does it in a slightly different way. So what can you tell us about how you structure this beautiful wall of, are they index cards?
Those are index cards. I
Okay.
have moved on to Post-its because they're a little easier to use. But yeah, so, and that purple stuff in the background, if you want me to get really nerdy and technical, is called extruded polystyrene. And it is used to insulate houses. And I got it from my mentor in grad school, Ethan Kanan, who I believe still is rehabbing a house. And he finished reading a draft of The Most Fun We Ever Had. And he said, he brought me a present, which was 3 enormous sheets of extruded polystyrene. It's essentially just like foam core. But that was his way of telling me, like, you're ready to keep on with this. And now I do it for everything. I do it for short stories. I have a new board. It's the same board on the back, but new Post-its for Same as It Ever Was. And I guess it wasn't during COVID, but I'm in New York, or I'm not in New York. I'm in Iowa City and my editor's in New York. So we did a lot of Zoom calls and stuff when we were working on the editorial side of the book. And there was one day last summer, I guess, where I just sort of did the like Vanna White, here's what this Post-it said. And Leah was like, move this there, move this. So it was sort of this interactive thing. But it's a really wonderful way to concretize or make visual something that is so ungraspable. Like, you can't hold a book in your head. You can't really conceptualize the full arc of a story, or I can't at least. So it's a really wonderful way to be able to see, we've spent 46 Post-its with Helen, and maybe that's too many, or maybe it's not enough. Or, we've spent 17 Post-its with the son arc or the marriage arc or whatever. And so it's kind of a way to quantify something that is not easily quantifiable. So I love it. And I also just think it's pretty. It's like it's a piece of installation art in my office. So.
What are so it's for listeners who can't see it,
Yeah.
one, go to Claire's Instagram, but it's extremely color coded. Are these different characters or different arcs, or like what are the colors mean?
I think in that iteration, each color is a character. And so I think the red Post-its there's the fewest red Post-its. I think those are Jonah because he had the fewest POV, or maybe it's Grace. I don't know. So I did that per character. Sometimes I do it per story arc. So
Sure.
sometimes it's like, this is the plot about in Same as It Ever Was. This is the part about Julia's childhood, so it's green. This is the part about Julia meeting her husband, so it's purple, whatever. So you can kind of do it for whatever makes the most sense. For most fun, it made a ton of sense to do it per character because there are 7 POV characters.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was able to see then, Grace isn't getting a lot of airtime. And then for something like that, I was able to sort of realize maybe she doesn't need a lot of airtime. Maybe she's not getting a lot of airtime because she doesn't have as much going on. So it's fun in that way. I encourage people to do it. And I've had friends who call me and are like, oh my God, this is mind blowing. Like, I'm like, yeah, Post-it notes. Who
You
knew?
need to teach like a master class,
I know.
Yeah.
I would be honored.
We both also really appreciate the beautiful Wilco poster that,
Yes.
that can be seen in this photo.
I was at that show when was that 2003? I was a wee one, but I've
So
seen
cool.
them like 20 times.
Oh, I'm jealous.
So we end every episode with asking you for recommendations. What are you reading right now or excited about that our listeners should know about?
Oh God, this is when I always forget that I've ever read a book. Right now I'm reading The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters,
Oh.
which has been recommended to me by a lot of booksellers. It's wonderful. I'm listening to the audio actually, my Libro audio. I literally am. That wasn't like a plug, but
Don't worry, the whole episode's a plug.
yeah. I'm listening to that. I usually have a book I'm listening to and then a book I'm reading before bed. I just started. My boss at Prairie Lights, Jan Weissmiller, is very excited about a book called The Fountain Overflows by Rebecca West, which came out, I think, in the 40s. But it's essentially just a very funny, very timely family novel. So I was reading that. It became a little too, my brain was not ready for it, but it's very good. I feel like I'm reading something else. I just started reading The Shining for the first. I'd never read any Stephen King, and so I started reading The Shining last week, and then I needed something a little less dark.
Yeah.
So I started The Berry Pickers, which is not less dark. It's just dark in a different way. So I think that's what I'm reading right now.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, Claire, thank you so much again for taking the time to
Thank
meet with
you.
us. It's been such a pleasure, and we can't wait for your new book this June.
Oh, thank you. It's been a delight. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for listening to that interview, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. We certainly did. You all should run out and buy Claire's new book if it is post June, or if it's not, put it on your to-do list.
Yes, and as you now know, you can go visit her in her bookstore and have her recommend books to you.
What more could you ask for, honestly?
Not much.
Speaking of books, Karen, what are you reading right now?
I
Or
am
what have you just
so
read?
excited to tell you. You're going to love this book. It is a horror collection.
Not a big fan of horror.
That is a lie. I purchased this recently when Libro.fm was at our offsite in Chicago. We went to several bookstores. I'm sure you're all shocked to hear that. And at City Lit Books, I found this book. And before I tell you the name, I will tell you my selection methodology. It was one of 2 books in the horror section that had a shelf talker. I can't remember what the other one was, but I had read it. And this one said something like, this is by far the weirdest, most upsetting horror book I've ever read. I recommend it to everyone I know. So I bought it. And this week I read it in one sitting. It's called Things Have Gotten Worse Since Last We Spoke and Other Misfortunes by Boston writer Eric LaRocca. And oh my gosh, could not put it down. There are 3 longish short stories. They're not novellas by any means, but they're longer than your typical short story. They're all wildly different. But yeah, I am a huge fan. And I did notice when I purchased this one that he had other books on the shelf. So you can imagine what my next step is. I will also veer into the territory of stealing a little bit of thunder. But when I opened this book, the first blurb inside of it was by horror novelist Stephen Graham Jones. And as the universe would have it, on the same week that I saw this blurb, we interviewed Stephen Graham Jones for the podcast today. which was absolutely a highlight. And that episode will be coming out in the next month or so. So stay tuned for that.
Ugh, again, not to jump the shark, but wow. Is that not the phrase?
That's not what that means,
You,
but
you know, you know how I like to butcher phrases. Would you like to teach me what it means?
I think you meant jump the gun.
Jump the gun. That's what I was looking for. What's jump the shark then?
Like to become irrelevant or uncool.
Like me right now.
No. So jump the shark. What were you going to say?
Yes, so not to jump the gun, but yes, we did interview Stephen Graham Jones this morning, and it was amazing. Like you said, I like when he turned his Zoom video on. There was like scream mask behind him and like horror paraphernalia, and I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be a good one.
He had a Stephen King ball
Stephen
cap
King
on.
ball cap on, yeah.
He's amazing. I love him. I love him
Yes.
so much.
Yes.
Okay, I distracted us. What are you currently reading, or what have you just read and enjoyed?
Ooh, I finished literally yesterday Guncle Abroad by
Oh,
Stephen Rowley.
I'm so jealous. I haven't read it yet. Tell me
Ooh, it's
everything.
so good. And we just got to interview Stephen Rowley. So if you go back an episode or two, you could listen to that where we talk about Guncle Abroad. And at the time, I hadn't read it yet because it was too early. I didn't have the arc yet. But I have since got the ALC and listened to it, and it was unbelievably good. It was so fun to dive back into the world of Patrick and the kids and the drama there, and they're out of America. They're on a worldwide trip, and it's an adventure, and it's full of like family dynamics and laugh out loud funny, just like the first one. I find myself like giggling nonstop as I'm like bopping around the house doing laundry with my AirPods in. So if you liked the first one, you will absolutely adore this one. And if you haven't listened to the first one, go do that. It's great.
I'm so happy for you that you loved this because I know that the first one was very special for you. So I'm glad
Yes.
that it has continued.
Yes, big fan. So I guess we already teased upcoming episodes, so that's exciting.
Well, there's one more we could mention.
Ooh, yes, Libro has a big old birthday coming up.
Yeah, numero 10.
The 10th anniversary of Libro being a company.
Can you believe it?
Yes,
Time
because it's
flies.
awesome.
It is awesome.
Yeah, so we are doing a 10th anniversary episode where in the beginning of each episode, we always say, where we interview booksellers, bookstores, and more. And it's been a while since we've talked to a bookstore. So for the 10th anniversary episode, it is all bookstores. We are going to interview 3 or 4 or 5. We're not sure yet.
However many will talk to us.
Yes, whoever says yes. Booksellers and bookstore owners, and talk to them about their bookstore and audiobooks and their local communities, and it's going to be a grand old time.
I can't wait. One might even call it an extravaganza.
Oh my God. New jingle coming soon.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening. Just as a reminder, if you don't have a Libro.fm membership yet, you can start one right now. You can use the promo code SWITCH and you will get 3 audiobooks for your first month of membership instead of just 1. So really, really good time to consider signing up.
That is a crazy deal. So go do that.
I know.
And if you don't follow the podcast, please do. And if you do follow it, please rate the podcast. It is very helpful for us.
And as always, thanks for listening. That one.
I'm leaving all of them in.
And as always, thanks for listening.
That's the take, just so you know.
It better not be.
Oh, it will be.
I will quit.